I am really excited to review this clip today. For the first time in a long time, I feel like Stephen Bartlett, that is, has had someone on his podcast who has just spoken facts about the real way we should be thinking about our personal finances in a world that exists in the format that exists today with social media and all of this pressure that we heap on ourselves to be financially successful or financially free. And I'm not making a mockery of those terms, but I use air quotes because, it's different for every person. And you have to be able to define that yourself, not be led by social media in terms of what that basically means. Now, the gentleman that Stephen has had on the show is a guy called Morgan Housel. Now, Morgan Housel wrote an amazing book. It's called The Psychology of Money. If you've not read it, you should definitely go read it. It is absolutely phenomenal. And there's about 60 minutes of just pure gems that this guy is dropping from literally minute one. And look, I would love for you to tell me what you agree with, what you don't agree with, if any of this actually resonates with you, because this is very much my way of thinking about personal finances that for me has allowed me to get to a place where I used to be homeless, I used to be in a load of debt, but now I'm in a comfortable financial position. And I think that's really what everybody wants. And there's so much to be said about what we deem financial success to be that this guy just subtly just breaks down and shreds into smithereens. So let's get started with this clip. And it starts with Stephen asking this question.
Can you tell me how to achieve freedom financially and what I should be thinking about in the context of a world that's changing at such incredible speed? When we're talking about tariffs and recessions and now AI, I've been thinking over the last couple of weeks, like, what should my personal financial strategy be? How should I be thinking about it? Is it a strategy? Is it a psychology? Is it a mindset? What is it that I should be thinking about to survive this area of tremendous change and Trump economics and get through the other end with that freedom and independence that you and I both desperately value?
Great question. Fantastic question. And just listen to the response here.
This sounds like such a squishy BS kind of answer, but I think there's a lot of truth to this, and I'll explain in a second. It is largely a mindset, and that sounds crazy, but I'll explain what I mean. My grandmother-in-law, she passed away a couple years ago. She was 92 when she passed away. She, for 30 years, she lived off of nothing but Social Security. I think she got $1,700 a month from Social Security. She had nothing else, no savings, no pension, no nothing. She was the happiest person. I've met half a dozen billionaires in my life. I'm sure you have as well. None of them were as happy as she was. And she was like financially broke, but she had this level of psychological wealth that was like unparalleled. And the reason was off $1,700 a month. That was all she needed. She was perfectly happy toiling in her garden, watching birds, going for walks, hanging out, reading from books from the library, perfectly content with all of that. She didn't need anything else. So she had very little money, but she wanted even less. And she had a level of independence that a lot of billionaires do not. Because if you are a billionaire, if you have $1 billion in the bank, but you are so encumbered by your business, your employees, your suppliers, your customers, you're waking up at 3 a.m. sweating because you got this email and you're stressed out about it. You actually have very little independence in that situation. Your shareholders, regulators are coming down on you. I mean, we see this. There's no one in particular here, but we've seen very wealthy people kind of become sycophants to politicians. And the truth is, a lot of those like mega billionaires absolutely rely on politicians and regulators to keep their machine moving.
Now, this is so true. And I think where we are right now is a prime example of that with America's Trump in his second term. So I don't know if you pay attention to the politics, but if you watched Trump's inauguration, who were the 3 billionaires that he had in the front row? He had Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and he had Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, right, of Meta. And if you think about those individuals and the empires that they built, the companies that they've built, a lot of them are almost incumbent to the fact that they need Trump to pass favorable policies for their businesses to be successful, right? One that wasn't there, and I don't know if he was there or not, he might have been there, was Tim Cook. Now, Tim Cook is the head of Apple. Now, with Trump and his tariffs on China at 145%. I think it was 245% at one point, but 145% tariffs on any goods going into the US from China. That was hugely problematic for Apple. And if you watched any of my live streams about the tariffs, either here or on Instagram, I mentioned the fact that he would have to do something specifically for Apple because Apple is arguably, if not the most successful American company that exists and has ever existed today. The richest company in the world, or was one of the richest companies in the world. When tariffs went in, the share price in Apple, share prices of a lot of these companies basically tanked. But for Apple specifically, they manufacture a lot of their iPhones, AirPods, MacBooks, their desktops. They manufacture a lot of their products in China. So with 145 or 245% tariffs on imports going into the United States from China, that could potentially decimate the share price and destroy Apple as a business. Now, a billionaire like Tim Cook will know this. He'll be completely and utterly aware of this. And the question then becomes, well, what do you now do? Because you're heading up a company, an international company that everybody knows. I mean, all of my tech in this house right now is literally Apple. My phone's Apple. The laptop and the desktop that I'm working on right now is Apple. My laptop right here is Apple. I've got AirPods in right now. When you run a company like that is so globally recognized, that has global sales, has become one of the most recognized brands in history, you are going to have to cozy up to the likes of Trump to ensure that the company you're presiding over doesn't have a massive drop in value, therefore not delivering shareholder value to your investors. And so what he says here is absolutely crystal clear, and it's 100% facts. What he mentioned before around the psychology of things is even more important, because I think that ultimately one of the four flaws of society today is that we, through no fault of our own, I suppose, have fallen into this cycle of being dictated to when it comes to what good, what success, what financial freedom. And I don't mean to use air quotes again, it's like, but we get told what financial freedom and financial success looks like when really we should be deciding that on our own. And I'm a big, big believer in trying to understand what role does money actually play in your life. And it sounds like his relative, his grandmother, I think he was saying, figured that out. And it's one of the premises that I talk about in my book, which is this book right here, where I take people through the wheel of life and the finance world to really understand, like, what is the purpose of you going to work in the morning, earning all this money? What is it there to fund? What is it there to improve? What aspect of your life is it there to improve? And so it is very much psychological. The issue that we face today, though, is because of so much of this, we've got so much input, right, from our phones, from all over the place, that it becomes very, very hard to be able to discern the things that matter to us more than what is being spoken about and delivered to us in the inputs that we receive. Let's continue.
And so my grandmother-in-law on $1,700 a month had a higher level of independence than a lot of those people do. And that's why I say, like, a lot of this is a mindset, because the truth is the vast majority of people listening to this could have a level of independence. It's not that you can retire tomorrow, but you can have a level of financial independence once you realize that the key is managing your expectations more than it is how can I just pile up as much money as I possibly.
Now, okay, look, I just need to go full screen here because I think he's just made an absolutely fantastic point when it comes to the idea of managing expectations. Okay, that will sound counterintuitive to anyone who has been on social media and has been told to aspire for great things. Like, we're all told we should aspire to break our ceiling, right? To be as wealthy, as successful as we possibly can. So the idea of managing expectations almost feels like you're giving up on this idea of aspiring to something bigger, which I think is a fallacy, which I think is a misconception, a misunderstanding of what is being meant. But what I think he means by managing your expectation is understanding what that success looks like for you. And let's put it this way, right? Do you really need to go and buy a car that you can barely afford? Do you really need to go and buy a Rolex or a luxury watch that you can barely afford, that you know is a bit of a splurge, but your financial situation doesn't really put you into a position where you can comfortably afford that thing? You're going to buy it, but 2 months later, you're still under financial pressure. That's what I think he means by expectation, or at least what I mean by expectation whenever I coach people on this matter, to really understand what's the construct that we're working with here to make your money work more effectively with you. And just knowing what the expectation is does wonders in terms of having a level playing field, a set of rules that you can start to engage with to build a better life for yourself from a financial point of view. And I think that in today's day and age, this is something that is forever missing, and we need to kind of come back to, because it needs to ground us in reality.
Possibly can. It's easy to think, like, how do you become financially independent? Like, save a ton of money. And there's truth to that. Of course, that's part of it. But more of it is just in, like, what kind of life do you want to live? Because if your expectations are growing faster than your net worth, it's never going to feel like you'll never be independent. Never. You can have $100 billion, but if you want more and more and more, like, it's never going to feel like it's enough.
Is that old saying that there's always a bigger fish in the pond? And, like, look, I'll be upfront with you guys. I've been having a lot of stick recently because I'm in Dubai. And look, in a place like this, you realize that there are always bigger fish in the pond. But the question is, are you comparing yourself to the bigger fish in the pond? Or are you in a place where you understand and you're comfortable with your level of attainment because you understand what good and success and financial freedom or financial independence looks like for you? You can always chase more. And, like, I go back to the days when I was homeless and I thought, I would love just to have a roof over my head. I didn't really start thinking about home ownership until much, much later on, that you get to home ownership and then there's something else that you want to achieve. As human beings, we are wired to want more and more and more. But I guess the question then becomes, when is enough? And that's one of my biggest internal battles. And my missus always reminds me of it. When is enough enough? When do you actually have enough? Because the answer to that question is, you're never really going to have enough if you continue to chase and you don't have a good understanding of, this is what good or success looks like for me. And so what he's saying here has a lot of truth and it resonates with me deeply. You let me know whether it resonates with you.
Or if you enjoy bird watching and reading books like my grandmother-in-law, $1,700 a month, you're all set. You're set for 30 years.
You're rich.
You're rich.
I'm free.
She was psychologically rich, even if she was financially poor. And I think that's the biggest thing about it. Adam Smith, who was the greatest economist to ever live, this was 300 years ago, he once wrote about this. He was like, why do people work so hard? And he was just like, there's a simple question, but why do people work so damn hard? And he's like, it can't just be for our sustenance, because even poor people, as he was writing about it, had homes and adequate food most of the time. He's like, there has to be something else. And what that something else was, he wrote, was to be seen by other people. And it was attention and admiration. They wanted to be getting rich so that they could have a bigger house and a nice car, not in his day, but they wanted attention from other people.
Now, you tell me how true that is in today's society. Honestly, just tell me how true you think that is in today's society, particularly because we live in an attention economy where on social media, it is all about what you are seen to be doing. If it didn't happen, or if it isn't on the gram, it didn't happen. That's the kind of culture that we're in. And I fear, this is my biggest fear at least, bearing in mind that I made this channel for people who are much, much younger than me. I'm 45 right now. So I made this for people who are early 20s to 44, right? In today's society, my fear is that we're going further down this path of attention, showing off, and living to societal standards, that we completely and utterly forget what our standards should be. And it comes back to this psychology, this mindset of understanding where you are, because it is so true. Why do we buy the flash stuff that we buy? Why? I'll give you a prime example. I've said it a number of times, and I actually mention it in this book. One of my biggest financial mistakes was I went through a period of time where I would just go out. I love trainers. I would go out and just buy really expensive trainers. I bought £1,000 pair of trainers once. And why did I buy it? I bought it because I was in Selfridges with a bunch of my friends. There was a really nice looking girl at the till, and I liked the trainers. And obviously, as they come along and they help you and all this kind of stuff, my mates start winding me up and saying, "Well, you've got to buy it now, mate. She's going to make you think she's going to think that you're a loser." And what do? I buy the £1,000 pair of trainers because, hey, I don't want to look like a loser in front of a girl who I want to impress. For what reason? It's mind blowing. I think guys will resonate with this. It's one of the reasons why we buy the cars that we buy the clothes that we buy, and we go to the gym, or we do all of these things. It's to impress people. That outwardly extension or show of exuberance, to show that we're maybe doing a little bit better than we are. But really, when you peel back the layers, is it really the true version of us that we're showing? I can tell you with confidence that back then, absolutely not. I was just trying to fit in. I was trying to fit in with my peer group. I was trying to fit in with my work group. I was just trying to fit into life. And because of my background, I felt like I had to, now that I've got here, I've got to enjoy this money. I've got to buy the things that I've always wanted that I could never afford. And later on in this interview, this actual clip, they go on to this conversation of, you kind of have to get there to make the realization of your own. And for some extent, I guess what we're talking about now will make zero difference until you go on your own journey of self-exploration. But I do think that having this conversation and witnessing these type of conversations puts some context around how to approach this exploration that you might be.
But he was like, it's not that you needed the money. Because even in his day, 300 years ago in Scotland, I think he was like, look, people have homes and food. Like, what are they doing this for? And he was not criticizing that. Like, his whole point was like, they're going out and innovating. They're going to have great technology. And like, it's great to go do that. But the reason to do it was not because they had to stop. Now, of course, most people to get shelter and food do have to keep working, but they're working more than they absolutely need to because they want something else besides independence.
Is there an evolutionary basis for this? I was thinking the other day after watching an interview with Naval, where Naval talks about how, from an evolutionary perspective, humans don't really understand the concept of wealth, because once upon a time when we were cavemen and women, wealth was what you could carry.
Yeah.
But we do understand the concept of status, which really meant a lot to us in our sort of tribes and was life or death for many of us. So even though billionaires get all the money in the world, the next thing they want to do is start a podcast.
Yeah.
The point that Stephen is making here around the evolutionary side of this is really important, because if you go back all those years, wealth is what you could carry, right, with you, because the world was not in the place where it is now. We didn't have this abundance of resources and things that you can go and buy, because we now have this monetary system where we can accumulate wealth in the way that they couldn't do hundreds, maybe even thousands of years ago, right? So there is this idea and truth to the idea that he's alluding to here. And it does lead you to the question of, why is it? Because it has to be status. When you go and buy this thing, or you go and, purchase something, it's because you want recognition from somebody else, which is essentially status. And he's saying, how many multi-millionaires do you see who have podcasts? And it's like, well, why? Because if the only thing that you're playing for was the money, and the money was the reward, then you would stop surely at a certain level of wealth. And they do talk about this in this clip, and we'll get there in a moment. But it does ask a really pertinent question. And that, again, comes back to, after you accumulate, if you're successful enough to accumulate all this stuff, does it truly make you happy? Does it really give you purpose? Does it really serve the purpose that you thought it was going to serve you in the first place? And I think when you peel back those layers, I think oftentimes the answer to that is no.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because there's just not enough. Like, everyone I know.
Well, what a lot of them do too is when they have all the money in the world, what they want is immortality. You see these guys trying to live forever.
Yeah.
So that happens as well.
That's interesting. But that's linked to status, because status was longevity.
Yes.
Like, if you had status, you had food, you had the reproductive potential once upon a time.
Yeah.
So it's the same evolutionary sort of desire to like live survival.
Yeah. Harvey Firestone, who was a tire magnate 100 years ago, Firestone tires during the explosion in cars 100 years ago, he wrote about this in his biography. He was like, every rich person he knows, once they get money, buys a house that is way too big than they need. Not only bigger than they need, bigger than they want. Because a giant house is just a huge pain in the ass. The roof is leaking and like everything's breaking down. It's a huge pain to manage. So he wrote in his biography, he was like, why do we do this? And he was like, he did it too. He's like, I bought a house that is way bigger than I want. And it's a pain, it's a burden, but we all do it. And he's like, why? And he's like, it has to be status. There's no utility to a 40-bedroom house. Zero. There's a lot of downside in upkeep. But he's like, every one of us does it. And he said, even Henry Ford, who was like the cheapest SOB out there, lived in a giant mansion in Detroit. He's like, it's so natural. And he was like, it's just because we want to show other people. It's not utility. It's not making our lives better. It's actually making our life worse. But we have this evolutionary desire to show people that we've made it. That's the calling card.
But if it's hardwired, then is there much we can do about it?
I think it's true that virtually everyone who I really admire in life, by and large, they're not hugely successful people that you've heard of. They're just people who I've met, and they're ordinary people with ordinary jobs. But I'm like, man, you seem like you've got it all figured out. They took themselves out of the system that they were supposed to be in. And they're like, I'm just going to figure out my own way. And there's a really interesting story. A guy named Chuck Feeney. He started a company called DFS, the duty-free stores in airports. Mm-hmm. He made, I think, at the peak of his wealth, he was worth about $9 billion. And this was like in the 90s when that was a lot of money. Still is a lot of money. But he, the well-known part of Chuck Feeney is that despite that wealth, he lived like an ordinary person. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment. He flew coach. He drove like a normal car, lived like a normal guy. And some people criticize that from that. He gave all of his money to charity. He gave $9 billion away, lived like a monk himself. The less known part of Chuck Feeney that I think is more important is that when he first got wealth, became wealthy in the 1980s, he lived the life of a billionaire. He had a fleet of private jets. He had mansions all over the world. He had a yacht. And after doing it for a couple of years, he's like, I don't like any of this. He's like, I like being an ordinary, simple person. And so I'm going to go live an ordinary life. I don't care what the world tells me this is what I should want now that I have money. But he's like, but I don't. I want simplicity. And what I like about that is not that he chose to live like a monk, because I personally wouldn't want to do that. If I had that, I would have a jet if I had that kind of money. So it's not to say that he did it right, but what I like that he did is that he said, I don't care what the world tells me to like. I'm going to do it on my own terms. And that.
And look, I'm going to interject here, right? And I'm just going to come full screen here because I think this kind of reiterates the point a little bit more that I'm trying to drive home with this video. Do we know what we want versus what the world is trying to tell us we should want? And I think because we're so susceptible to the inputs of media, be that the news, be that social media, I think it's very, very easy to lose sight of what we actually want. And the more and more I think about this, because obviously this is a finance channel and I coach people all the time who are in different stages of life, wanting different things. The last couple of coaching sessions that I've had with people have really kind of come to the forefront of mind now. And I remember one of my clients, Mel, she's actually in Dubai right now. We had a first coaching call last year. We had one a couple of months ago. And between maybe a 6 or 8 month period of us having a coaching call and the second one we had a couple of months ago, what she realized she wanted changed drastically. And she was more about, she's mid-20s, maybe come up to about 30 or so. And she's like, I don't necessarily want to buy a house and have to service the house and be stuck in the UK. I want to be able to explore the world. I want to be able to just enjoy the planet and live a little bit more free. And I feel like a lot of people feel like that these days because we're in such a global kind of economy in a global world. It's easy to get out and about. And for her, it was amazing to see how her priorities changed from 7 months prior to 2 months ago. And she's acted upon the fact that she wants to see the world. And now she's actually moved over here. And when I say the input from social media, like I said, I've had a lot of stick for moving here. And this move has been something that has been in the works for 4 years now. probably even longer than that, but actively planning for this for 4 years. And one of the things that we realized in conversation with my partner is we wanted to get away from the normal 9 to 5. Well, I wasn't a 9 to 5 because I was running my own business, but I was working almost every hour of the day trying to build the channel, trying to build my own business. And my partner, she's a teacher, going to school, waking up when it's dark, coming back home when it's dark, and pissing down, and the weather, and just the fact that you feel very, very demoralized in the morning when it's gray outside is very, very different to when you wake up in the morning and it's sunny. You feel more motivated, you have better mood. That vitamin D really kind of helps you feel better. And we had an extensive conversation about the fact that we wanted to change this, and we wanted to maybe experience a different life somewhere else where we could enjoy the day to day and enjoy each other's company and explore a different culture, a different place. And I think those conversations are really, really important. And again, when it comes to the media, understand that regardless of what the media or social media is feeding you, that you still have autonomy over the decisions that you make, and being cognizant of the fact that you are being fed information to influence the way you think and to influence the decisions that you make. And Dubai is a prime example of this, because I get so much stick. People tell me that I've moved just for tax purposes and I don't want to pay tax and all this kind of stuff. But people forget that it is such a safer community. If you want to have kids, this is the safest place on the planet. It is the safest place on the planet for women. You have a different lifestyle here, world-class infrastructure. Like, the tax situation happens to be a cherry on top of the cake. And the tax issue is only an issue because of everything that's happened in the political landscape back home since Labour took office. I would probably argue before that with the Tories as well, right? It's only become an issue, a tax issue, because of all those things. And people forget that people have been migrating to different locations with tax benefits for decades. People have been moving to Portugal, to Spain, to France, to Italy for decades. It's never been an issue until we have this narrative in the media that, well, tax and the economic situation in the UK means that if people are leaving, they're doing a disservice to the country. And I think it's so much more simple than that, in the fact that you have to decide what it is that you want for your life. And in our case, be it for 2 years, be it for 3 years, be it for 4 years, we wanted to live a different lifestyle. And I want to encourage you that everyone's going to face really difficult decisions at some point. Decisions that you're going to wrestle with, decisions that you think, okay, look, how do I even make this work? Like, you might be leaving family behind, you might be leaving friends behind. But it's important for you to have that reckoning and to take the decision that you feel is best in the interest of you. I mean, we planned this for 4 years. We came here with quite a sizable amount of cash, 6 figures amount of cash, because we know that this is an expensive society to do it. But what is the point in having, that money invested, growing, if it isn't to serve the life that we want to live right here and right now, whilst we're still here and in good health and alive? What is the point of that? And so it's very important, coming back to the core point that I'm trying to drive away in this video, is it is very much a mindset, psychological point of view of understanding what good looks like for you and having the courage to actually pursue that thing, regardless of what societal norms or society might think, or your friends might think, or your family might think about it.
And that's true independence.
That's true status.
That's true status too. He's like, I don't care. That's the ultimate definition of FU money. Of like so much money that, like, I don't care. You tell me I'm supposed to live in a mansion in Beverly Hills, but I like my 1-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. I like my buddies over here. Another person who's done that to a very real extent is Warren Buffett. Lives in the same house today that he bought when he was 27 or whatever it was.
He's got 100 billion or something.
Right. And of course he could live anywhere. He could buy anything. But he likes being with his friends, doing it on, likes playing bridge with his buddies.
In the first case, though, that gentleman had to have his dream fail him first before he realized. And so this raises another question, which is, does the viewer at home have to make the $100 million and then taste it, buy the mansion, to realize that it was never about the mansion?
I think the answer to that is yes.
Oh God.
That it's very difficult. There's a thing where I forget who said this, but like they're responding to the quote, money doesn't buy happiness. And they're like, okay, but let me go figure that out for myself first. Like, if you don't have a lot of money and you see rich people tripping over themselves And people like Will Smith saying, like, I was no happier at all when I was rich than when I was poor. Actually, I was happier when I was poor.
Mm.
If you are poor, when you hear that, you're like, bullshit. I don't believe.
And this is the bit that I love about this conversation. It is so real and so truthful. Because look, if I look back to my 20s, I know that I was looking up to all the rappers who were my idols. And if someone said to me that, you didn't have to have 2 million, 4 million, 5 million, 10 million quid in the bank to be financially comfortable and to be happy, I'd be like, nah, especially with my background of being homeless and struggling with debt for such a long time. I would have been like, you don't know what you're talking about. Get lost. But it's so true. And I love that he's given this answer, because I think that ultimately everyone has to go on their own journey of discovery to figure out what works for them. My sincere hope for a lot of people, though, is that they come to a reckoning sooner rather than later, because the time lapse in you having this reckoning or this realization, this epiphany, is very, very important, and it can significantly impact the decisions that you make and how much you're able to secure yourself with by instituting the right kind of financial habits. All the things that I talk about in the book here, which are basically the 5 financial principles that have turned my finances around to the point where I'm financially independent now. And so I love this answer here. But let me know whether or not you agree with that in the comment section.
Believe it. I have to go figure it out for myself. I think a lot of lessons in life you have to learn firsthand.
Especially when all the problems staring you in your face are somewhat associated to money, like
Yeah.
the pain in your belly, the bills on your desk, the threats from the court. I'm thinking of myself here, that I was getting the letters coming through with the red text on them telling me that my credit cards were going to be shut down. The inability to feed yourself, to socialize with your friends, the heating in your house, your child's pencil case costs, all of it seems to circle back to money. And so when you hear people who are wealthy being subjectively honest about their own experience and then what's made them happy, it is hard to hear.
Yeah.
Like I was just imagining, if I was hearing this, these stories when I was in that situation, I would still fucking go for it anyway.
Me too.
Right.
Me too.
Now, let's say that there's a big difference between not being able to buy food for your kids and making 200 grand per year.
Yeah.
And the difference between 10 grand a year and 200 grand a year is massive.
Yeah.
Takes away so many stresses, so many, worries about being evicted and whatnot. But the difference between 200 grand and 500 grand is not that much. And the difference between 500 grand and 20 million is not that much. And the difference between 20 million and 20 billion is zero. I think that's a lot of what it comes down to. And even I think there is such thing as like a peak net worth that you would want in life, after which all the money that you accrue becomes like a social liability. I mean, who has more social liability or like pressure than the mega rich? Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. There's like a huge amount of pressure. Like, you better donate this money and you better do a good job doing it.
So what have we been speaking about on the channel over the past few weeks? We've been speaking a lot about this idea of Gary Stevenson's campaign and the fact that people who have hoarded wealth, there is a pressure on them. There is a call for them to contribute more, even though, let's be completely honest, they've worked extremely hard to build what they built. So for them, it's like, why should I give away the money that I've worked so hard to accumulate? So that social pressure really does exist. And when he says there is a number for your peak net worth, this is what we're talking about. What does that look like for you based on your circumstances? And this number will inevitably change as you get older. In your 20s, it's going to be 30, different than if you're in your 30s. In your 30s, it's going to be different if you're 40s. In your 50s, it's going to be different. In your 60s, the number is going to be different. But being cognizant that, okay, I have an idea that if I could have a net worth of X and work towards to build that, that's going to give me some sense of freedom. The unfortunate fact is that a lot of people don't know how to arrive at that number. And there is a great section here, which I'm just going to skip to. It's about 13 minutes, about 13:36. Let's get to this section. Steve asks Morgan, how do you navigate and actually protect yourself in times like this? And I've spoken about this a number of times on the channel over the past 5 years. The answer that he gives and how he explains it is just, it's perfect. But those of you who have been following the channel for some time, you'll recognize the answer to the question. So let's just skip to that section right here.
this issue of tariffs, recession, and everything that's going on at the moment, are there any things practically for those that don't understand the economy and economics generally that we should be thinking about to make sure that we don't get burnt?
This is less advice going forward, more than just like something to remember next time, which is that if you're worried about being laid off, if you're a small business owner worried about going under, the need for room for error and cushion and savings and backup plans were just as important a month ago as they are today. You're just learning how important they are today. And I challenge you to remember that in the future, when this is all over, whenever it's all over, that when the economy is going well and you feel stable in your job, stable in your career, that is when you absolutely need backup plans and room for error and savings and eschewing debt and whatnot. I have a very high level of cash as a percentage of my net worth. And a lot of financial advisors would look at that and say, like, what are you saving for? Like, what's going on here? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm saving for a world that I know is very fragile. And I have no idea what's going to happen to me personally or what's going to happen to the economy. But if you're a lay student of history, you know that things break all the time. And so my advice to you, if you're realizing that for the first time, that how fragile the world can be and how the job security that you thought you had might not have been as strong, remember this next time, how important room for error and backup plans are.
And relative to...
And what he's talking about there is emergency funds. Making sure that you have some cash set aside whilst things are going well and you have disposable income that you're setting aside for things that you don't necessarily expect coming down the track. And he said, next time. I've said this a number of times over the years on the channel and on Instagram. There is always going to be a next time. There is always going to be another time where the economy isn't as great as it has been, where you're going to find yourself in a similar situation where you need to have this financial buffer, this emergency fund to tie you over, to ensure that you're not relying on things like debt, that you're not relying on things like payday loans, for example, to cover your existence. And look, this is something that we spoke about on the channel literally last week, the amount of people that are using buy now, pay later to fund their groceries. Like, that is an unattainable situation to be in. So it's all about understanding that things run in cycles. You'll have boom periods, you'll have bust periods. The ones who are very successful are those of us, from a financial point of view, are those of us who are able to identify that when things are going well, we need to basically spend less, not be so reliant on debt, and where we can completely eliminate debt, bad debt that is, toxic debt, and try and make sure that we've got money set aside in an emergency fund. And then after that, money that we can then invest into the markets to grow our net worth. It's not a complicated formula. It's simple in its nature. But the reason why it's so difficult for many people is because most people do not have the psychological foundations and the psychological underpinnings to make it work in a practical sense. That's why this book is so important, because it talks about how to structure your finances. I've run through this in a 6-week boot camp or book club, which I've had maybe 5 cohorts in private groups, and I've had about 5 cohorts in corporate settings. So I run these quite a bit. I don't know when the next one's going to be because we run it for 6 weeks. But that's the whole point. It's these things are simpler than you think, but your biggest enemy is trying to overcome the internal programming that we're all born with. We know that financial habits are locked in at the age of 7. We have to try and override those psychological boundaries that we find ourselves constrained by in order to break free and put these financial underpinnings in place. Once you're able to break free of that, which we do in this book by using practical exercises, the wheel of life, the finance wheel, looking at, okay, your life in this moment right now, if you had to look at 8 areas of your life, what would you want to improve? If you scored each of them 1 out of 10, where do you score well? Where do you score really poorly? And if there are certain areas that are a priority for you, for example, you want to go and spend more time with friends and family, you want to have more recreational time, which a lot of people don't have these days because it's all about work, 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 work. Well, what are those things that you want to improve? And what is it going to take to improve it? Because a lot of the time, and Stephen said this, a lot of our worries are financially connected. A lot of things that you want to improve in life will be connected to your finances. So if you can identify that, what that one or two things are that you want to improve, and we're able to dive deep into, right, what are the financial implications? What can we change from a financial point of view to structure your finances so you can do more of this? That's where the sense of fulfillment, balance, and financial independence, financial freedom, if you want to call it that, comes from. But as a society, like I've already said, we are susceptible to social media and media inputs because there's so much of it every day. We're being programmed to think a certain way. And those of us who are able to be financially successful are able to decipher the noise and understand what really matters in the construct of day to day life. Look, if you've made it this far, I'm really, really conscious. We're about 40 minutes in, which is one of my longer ones. I didn't intend for it to be this long, but thank you so much for staying. If you made it this long, just comment Stephen down below with your comment and let me know what part of this clip on Direct CEO hit home the hardest. I'd love to know, what do you agree with? What do you not agree with? What are your general thoughts? I'll catch you next week. Cheers.